After the founding of New China in 1949, Chiang Kai-shek was very worried that a large amount of assets of the national government around the world would be directly transferred to the name of the People's Republic of China. The main method he and his son Chiang Ching-kuo thought of was to privatize state assets. That's right, it is transferred to the personal name. In addition to the well-known four great families, many senior Kuomintang generals and senior officials of the national government sent money to their overseas accounts through open channels during the defeat in 1949, and some even used military expenses and foreign exchange. Like Tang Enbo, he was disheartened after the Battle of Shanghai. Thinking of Japan spending his old age in peace, he transferred $500,000 of military expenditure to Japan through the Bank of America through his cronies to buy real estate for himself. There is also some money that is actually public, and for the purpose of avoiding being forcibly received, an account is opened in a private name and deposited in a U.S. bank. For example, Chiang Kai-shek once instructed Yu Hung-jun, the president of the central bank, to remit a huge sum of $10 million to Mao Bang-chu, lieutenant general, deputy commander of the Kuomintang Air Force and director of the procurement department in the United States. Mao Bang-chu is the nephew of Mao Fu-mei, Chiang Kai-shek's original wife. Lao Zhang has Chi Tonggui's style, but he will support and take care of anyone who is related to him. But people's hearts can't stand the test, and neither can their relatives. Mao Bang-chu, who has lived in the United States for many years, looked at the huge sum of money in his account, and finally chose to run away after learning about the situation of domestic defeat. This was the sensational scandal of the Lieutenant General of the National Army fleeing with money in the early 1950s. Later, the international cases between Taiwan and Mao Bang-chu have been fought for many years, and it is said that some have been recovered. In short, in that chaotic era, military generals and high-ranking government officials from all walks of life arranged their own escape routes. Hong Kong, Southeast Asia, the United States, and Japan were everywhere, a mess. Therefore, the topic of overseas assets of the Republic of China has become a historical confusion. Among the fleeing National Army generals and government officials, those who were well prepared and managed assets were often stranded overseas. They lived a happy life in the United States, Japan, and Southeast Asia, and started a colorful second half of life. And people like Liu Ji, who were looted of their stupid money and became teachers of overseas Chinese primary schools in Jakarta, Indonesia, would usually return to the island after thinking twice, out of consideration for preventing them from defecting to the mainland. Lao Zhang would not blame these people, and would usually keep a slack job as a strategy consultant alive. It is difficult to check and count personal money overseas, but the overseas assets of the Taiwan government are obvious. In November 2020, Taiwan's foreign exchange reserves exceeded $500 billion for the first time, ranking fourth among economies in the world, after mainland China, Japan, and Switzerland. At present, nearly 60% of Taiwan's foreign exchange reserves are US dollar bonds and deposits, and about 30% are euro assets. How to recover this part of assets in the future will become a big problem. Because according to the gangster style of European and American countries, freezing, confiscation or transfer are their usual tricks. To whom? Government in exile. Even if none of the people on the island left, Taiwan's representative to the United States, Xiao Mei-chin, and others would not be willing to be lonely, and there would inevitably be a bunch of moths. This is all predictable. In addition to foreign exchange, Taiwan also has a lot of real estate overseas, such as offices around the world. There are roughly two types of overseas institutions in the world. One type is purchased or built by the sending country at its own expense, called self-financed embassies. The other type is built by the host country and rented out, called unified construction embassies. Taiwan is very rich. Although it does not have embassies in the legal sense, most of those overseas offices are built at their own expense. According to the provisions of the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations, under normal circumstances, even if the two countries break off diplomatic relations, the property of the embassy at its own expense should be protected. However, there are always exceptions to everything, and Taiwan does not belong to the usual situation. Because the important jurisprudence of the Taiwan issue is the One China principle, that is, all thorny international affairs involving Taiwan are disputes over China's representation. This is not just a stipulation in the Constitution of the People's Republic of China. This principle also applies when looking at the laws of the Taiwan region. Because of this, some countries often confiscate their embassies and transfer them to the mainland when they break off diplomatic relations with Taiwan, South Korea in 1992 and Nicaragua at the end of 2021 have all adopted this model. Taiwan's embassy in Nicaragua was severed when Taiwan donated the embassy building to the local anti-government Catholic Church, but the Nicaraguan government announced that it had confiscated it and handed it over to mainland China. There are roughly three types of subjects in modern economic life: individuals, governments, and enterprises. The overseas assets of Taiwanese companies will also be a big problem in the future. TSMC's 5 nanometers plant in Arizona is already under construction and is expected to be completed in 2 years. The investment is as high as $12 billion and will be the most advanced fab outside TSMC Island. One of the most important reasons why the United States wants to hollow out Taiwan's semiconductor industry is to ensure the integrity of its semiconductor industry chain and prevent geopolitical crises. At that time, whether the crazy American politicians will simply confiscate these factories is anyone's guess. After all, Washington does not have any integrity and bottom line. In fact, it is not the first time that the Americans have confiscated the assets of Taiwanese companies or individuals. In 1949, a lot of dry goods from companies under the names of the 4 major families were seized by the United States. Washington's reason is simple: the money was originally used to aid Chiang Kai-shek in the Civil War, but it was embezzled by UMOVs. American aid is allocated to the national government, most of which are corrupted by the 4 major families and then secretly transferred to the United States. Isn't it funny to think about this cycle? Song Mai-ling and her favorite nephew Kong Lincoln, right, and Kong Ling-wei, left. A friend may want to say, Taiwan has assets overseas, and other countries also have assets in Taiwan, right? Come and not go indecently. In fact, this point has already been considered in the anti-secession law promulgated in 2005. The anti-secession law states progressively from top to bottom, and the preconditions for taking necessary measures in Article 8 are often the most concerned by the outside world. In fact, the 9th article after that is also rich in content. Article 9: when non-peaceful means and other necessary measures are adopted and implemented in accordance with the provisions of this law, the state shall do its best to protect the life and property safety and other legitimate rights and interests of Taiwan civilians and foreigners in Taiwan, and reduce losses. At the same time, the state shall protect the rights and interests of Taiwan compatriots in other parts of China.